Good afternoon, everybody. I am your host, Catherine McCord. You know me from Career Launch Live and now from the Supermania Show. And I am doing a random LinkedIn Live on this beautiful Thursday afternoon with Ben Eden because we're going to talk about who's taking care of HR and keeping mental wellness in the forefront for HR. How are you today, Ben?
I'm so good, Catherine. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So let me first give a little bit of background. Before February of 2020, I was an executive HR professional at an international company. And I chose to leave that company in February of 2020, good timing, I know, to become a speaker and a coach on the subject of emotional wellness because I saw how it affected me personally and how I suffered in silence, even though on the external, my life was great. People said, Ben, you have a picture perfect life. But I knew
Hmm.
that deep down, I was dealing with some things, but I felt
Right,
like I couldn't tell anybody because my
right.
life was so perfect and I couldn't destroy that image. I was HR. I had to have all the answers, right?
Isn't that scary that how that picture perfect mindset creeps into our brains like, oh, I can't deviate from that. I can't let anybody know that there's anything that's not flawless in my life, especially to your point in HR, because we're supposed to be the ones holding it together for everybody else at work.
Exactly. And there
Right.
are so many
Absolutely.
things, and we're going to talk about these things, I'm sure, today. So many ideas, or in the world of coaching, we call beliefs, that we have that drive our behavior. But if we were to challenge those beliefs, we'd be like, I don't need to act that way. Why would I? I mean, it's fine that I'm vulnerable. People want vulnerability. People want authenticity. And yet, because of some belief that says HR can't be that way, then we feel like we never are, and then we suffer the consequence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, so what do you think created that perception of HR? That no, that has to be because it's an incredible sense of obligation to be straightforward. You know what I mean? To be emotional for others, but not for ourselves. How do you think it came to be that way?
That's a great question. So let me try answering that with a little broad answer, if that works. So and we're talking HR professionals, so this is not news, but we know that back in the olden days, it was personnel and it was paperwork and it was get me my paycheck. And it was very just, I need somebody to check the boxes so I don't have to do it. And HR has evolved a ton over the last number of years, and especially the last 2 years. But to be frank, unless you're blessed to be in a company that truly understands the value of HR, you're probably seen as, I don't truly understand what you do, but I need you because you do some things that for me, right? You seem to help, but I don't really understand what you do. And so we're in this place of always trying to prove our value,
That's true.
which is
That is true.
unfortunate, but it's a truth that we all just have to say, okay, if that applies to me, yeah, I can relate. And then what can I do about it?
Right. And it's kind of like in the medical profession. I think that in the HR field, we see a lot of the pain, right? So if somebody's going through something, we're going to know about it typically. A lot of times we're the first place that people kind of stop or start. If there's something going on in the company, we feel that stress very intensely. So there is a lot of that kind of, needing to be strong for others kind of aspect, that kind of thing. And also a lot of confusion about what we do. I get even in the recruiting space, I get people that are massively confused about what it is that I do as a headhunter. So it's a very interesting space. So thinking about that, there's this element of having to help others with pain, either whether in the, whether it's an organizational shift or a personal shift that they're going through, maybe something difficult in employee relations. What are some things, keeping that in mind, that as HR professionals we can do to take care of ourselves?
Ooh, okay, this is good. And we're getting to the heart of things, aren't we? Now, Catherine, if you're okay with it, this is what I was thinking about as I prepared for this conversation. Would you be okay throwing out a real scenario, of course, keeping it confidential, but
Of
if you could
course.
give a real scenario and then I could answer that question to this real scenario, I think that'd be a benefit for the listeners. What do you think?
Okay. No, I think that's fantastic. I think it is. So keeping things confidential. Years ago, I worked for an organization in which I had a staff member who was in leadership, who all of a sudden his attitude completely changed and just came in real, it was always real supportive of the team previously, a real like rah type, started coming in grumpy, complaining, fussing at people all the time. So I called him in, sat down with him, and it turns out his wife had just tried to commit suicide.
Mm.
And he didn't have any more PTO, and he didn't feel like he could take time off to go be with her. And he was just stressed to the max. So that was my real life scenario. Do you want me to stop there or say what I did to fix it, or you tell me how far to go with that?
Go for it. Let's hear what you did.
Go
And then
for it.
I'll
Okay.
just be a coach and I'll break things apart. That's okay.
So sure. So I immediately first I just sat with him a minute. Just sat there and just let it be for a minute and just, let him get everything out and just talk to him as a human for a minute, because I was genuinely concerned for the situation. And then I said, okay, we're going to figure out this PTO thing. And I want you to go ahead, wrap up whatever it is you're doing and go be with your wife. The PTO will be covered. Don't you worry about it. And I stayed true to my word, made sure everything got taken care of. But that was a really unique situation to be part of. But that's what I did. I just sat with him and then followed up and made sure he had everything he needed and got the PTO handled.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for this example.
Sure.
So let's break it apart. This is fun. With this example, it was being used, so you can give me honest answers. Now you're fortunate to be in a situation where you could say, look, we're going to take care of the PTO and we're good. Because unfortunately, some HR professionals would be in that situation and they say, yeah, an easy solution would be to give them a little bit more PTO, but maybe their hands are tied. Their policy is strict. They don't have the ability to change that. So you were fortunate to be able to do that.
Do you want to know the truth?
Let's hear it.
I was actually not in an environment that was conducive to that. I just fudged a few things and made it happen, which I do not necessarily recommend that every HR person do.
Right.
But I did. That's what I did.
Yeah. That's another subject for a different conversation, right? It's like when and how and if and what that can solve. But let's stick to the emotional and mental wellness here, right? So first I'm going to talk about you, and then we're going to talk about that person. So with you, I want you to tell me how you reacted when you first heard about him and his wife. And then I want to hear how you felt after you said, hey, we're going to take care of this PTO thing.
My first reaction was just sadness for him and his wife, because that's such an awful, awful thing to go through. And it was a little bit public the way that it happened too. There was actually a news story surrounding it. I did not know it was them. There was no names given in the news story, but still it was a little bit public. And so it was just sadness. It was really tough. And to see somebody who was such a strong person go through that was really tough. And then after I was able to fix it, I felt, or not fix it, but to help in some sort of way, to fix it on the professional end. I could fix it on the professional end.
Yeah.
I felt that I had contributed, and I felt some relief to that sadness. And then I was able to just kind of keep going.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being vulnerable, by the way.
Sure. That is the point.
Yeah. With this case, we have to realize, or I'm going to think of your situation plus what could happen with a lot of other people. If we're in HR, and yes, we're in that position where we can and where we're able to solve a lot of these problems. So when we hear about a personal situation like this, yes, it's probably going to come to HR. And then we hear about it. And these things can be traumatic. They can be very stressful. They can be like, wait, what? And then it's very possible that we carry that. Mm-hmm. Right? We say, wow, that must be so hard. Maybe I do understand it. Maybe I don't. But maybe our tendency is to try to lift that off of them, and then we carry it.
Right.
And we're just not often in that place. And maybe that isn't even necessary. Right?
Right.
And so that's where we have to realize, us in HR, we often do. We carry the emotional pain of others because we want to solve it. We empathize. We care so much. What we have to realize is there's still a way to care without having compassion fatigue, as the saying goes today, right? So in your case, you felt the sadness, and I'm glad you named it. You gave it a name for that emotion. Now you felt the sadness, and then you were able to do something to solve it. And so in your
Right.
brain, if you don't mind, I'm going to explain a little bit about how the brain works. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Okay. So our brain says, if I feel a certain way, I like it or I don't. And if I like it, I'm going to continue doing something to feel that way. I'm
Hmm.
trying to make my hand show up here. If I don't like something, then I'm going to go through my files and say, well, how can I feel better? And then we usually have a habit to turn to, right? So
Right.
let's give an example of somebody who was not in that situation to say, I'm just going to give them more PTO.
Hmm.
Let's say they're in a situation that says, oh my goodness, that is so tough and I'm feeling your pain. I just don't really have an option for you. I'm sorry, your PTO's out and I need you here tomorrow because your shift needs you.
Yeah.
That's a rough position to be in. And then you go home and you're stressed. And the next day you see the employee and you can see the sadness, and maybe even the employee's a little sad, mad at you because now they're like, what the heck? I came to you to solve my problem and he didn't. So we're carrying more and more. And so then our brain says, well, I don't like to feel sad. I don't like to feel scared. I don't like to feel embarrassed. So what am I going to do? And that's when we start to turn to like anger. And you say, well,
Right.
now I'm mad at the company. We might start first. I'm mad at myself because I couldn't figure out this problem. I'm smart. I'm HR. I'm supposed to have all these answers. I'm supposed to be better
And
than
I've
this.
seen that a lot in my clients that are on the HR side. I have seen that a lot. The internalization of everything, and I should have been able to fix this or that, and they just can't. They're just not in a realistic position to do so.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And then here's the reality of what happens. Anybody in that situation can give their individual answer to this. If they're so mad at themselves internally and they feel like they can't tell anybody, I can't complain to my boss, I can't tell my coworkers that I have a weakness, my family wouldn't understand, and I just don't want to talk to anybody. You just live with it. But remember what your brain does. Brain doesn't like feeling that way. So it says, I'm
Hmm.
smart. I'm going to find a solution. What might that be? I'm going to binge watch something all night long. I'm going to turn to alcohol. I'm going to start eating. All sorts of these things. And then it just adds to our self-loathing. Does that make sense?
That's very true. No, it's very true. And actually, I've had psychological experts on Career Launch Live before that have talked about that. And I recently had a discussion with a friend of mine who does financial coaching and also weight loss coaching. Believe it or not, just both of those things. And she talks about that, about the tie-in to, and a lot of her clients on the weight loss side, the reason that they get into those poor habits is that something happened that created patterns of needing to find other ways to get the pleasure senses activated
Yeah.
and to get those different hormones flowing and those different chemicals flowing throughout the body. So that's where a lot of those people get into those unhealthy habits. So actually, very much to your point, I think that is a very real scenario, and I've seen it happen in real life. I really
Yeah.
have. So my question to you is, so knowing this about ourselves, what are the things that we can do to prevent our unhealthy habits and to have healthy releases for these feelings that come up?
Yes. And I love that you say healthy releases, because that's a
Mhm.
great term that kind of visualizes what we need to do with that emotion. I always say you either avoid or you acknowledge your
Right.
emotion. You have one or the other, right? And if you avoid, then you're carrying it, and that's when life becomes rough. When you face the burnout, you face the compassion fatigue and everything else.
It's a great comment from David. I just was posting it up there so we could both see it.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, good term there too. I've actually never heard the empathy fatigue, but I like
That
that.
is fantastic, David. Thank you. I'm going to do a little bit of research on that. Sorry, Ben,
Right.
keep going.
No, that's good. Thank you. Let's see. So, no, I just got thrown off a little bit. How'd that happen?
So we're talking about the releases and
Right,
having a
right.
positive release versus negative.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, either avoid or acknowledge. When we acknowledge, it's actually more simple than most of us realize. We're just not used to it. And so we do think it's more difficult. But
Right.
just like you did, where we give it a name, and we notice it and we name it. We say, wow, that must be hard. Maybe I don't truly understand it, but I'm feeling sad. And that's okay. I'm going to
Yeah.
acknowledge it and realize that I'm human just like everybody else in this company. And if we need to give ourselves permission and say HR can be sad, okay.
That's a new hashtag. Hashtag HR can be sad. There you go. It's
Yes,
okay.
because HR has emotions and we can
That's
feel.
right.
So give yourself that permission and honor that. And what happens is the sadness, it's not going to say, now I'm going to overpower you and now you're going to be sad the rest of your life. What sadness now says is, thank you for listening.
Right.
I just wanted to share a message with you, and I'll see you later.
Yeah,
And then that's when it releases.
that's right.
But to answer your question more specifically, an emotion is an energy. So when we feel sad, we might feel empty, we might feel heavy, we might feel something, and we need to release that energy. And this is where it's very unique to people. It might be the exercise, it might be singing, it might be playing the piano, it might be breathing, it might be all sorts of things. But you do need to find something that uses your body in a way to release that energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, I live close to a beach. So sometimes I'll go over there. I'll take my dog on a walk. I'll just stop and listen to some music that I really like. I actually have a playlist specifically for defunking myself, as I call
Oh,
it.
nice.
Yeah. And it takes me through a cycle of calming and then raising the energy back to a positive place very specifically and kind of putting me more in a productive mindset. I grew up with around musicians, so I very much like to use music as a tool in that way. Um, so I want to also take a minute to talk to you a little bit about. So, we're using these tools, we're being healthy, but what are some things that HR folks can do just for general um, maintenance, not just to get out of once you're in a critical situation, but just to maintain a healthy outlook and a healthy mental status? What are some tips from you there?
Okay, perfect. Now, what I'm going to say is not new, all right? But it is unused, right? It's just what happens. People say you need to exercise every day. And, yeah, I've heard that before, but do you do it?
Right, exactly.
And so these principles definitely work. They are simple, so they can be short and not overwhelming, but they have to be done. And so one of the most powerful for me is reach out. You have to have somebody you can talk to. Do you know why people go to HR and they feel good when they're done? It's because they're talking to somebody.
Right.
And the same thing happens with HR. We need to find somebody to talk to. But too often, and I said it before, but it was my personal experience, I just felt like I couldn't relate to anybody.
Right.
Therefore, I told myself I can't tell anybody because nobody will understand. Well, there's billions of people on this earth, and there's probably somebody who will. So,
You know who else can understand you? Other HR people.
yeah,
Other
right?
HR people. Get you some other HR friends that will relate to what's going on with you.
Exactly. Even if they don't understand the true situation, they can understand, oh my goodness, that would be so frustrating. Let me tell you about a time that I
Absolutely.
had that too. And it's like, okay, this feels good that I'm not alone, feeling lame or feeling how I am, right?
Absolutely. Yes,
So
absolutely. I think that
go ahead.
that's I no no I was just going to hit on that. I think that the tribe aspect is always so important. And we talk about that a lot on the show, is having your tribe, the people that are your rah-rah, the people that reach out to you, the people that are good support for you in all kinds of various ways, professionally and personally. And I think that having the people that you can call on your bad day is very much an important part of that.
Yeah. And so let's hit on this a little bit more, if that's okay. Because, on a personal level, I'm just thinking of these last 2 years being an entrepreneur, thinking, well, I have a history of success. I know how to achieve success, but this is hard. My goodness, if I'm honest, then this is hard, and that's okay. And so there were times that I would reach out to a fellow entrepreneur who was also growing his business, and I would just reach out and I'd be honest. I'm like, dude, I'm trying my best, but it just doesn't seem to be working. And it's hard. I don't know if this is going to work. And then he's like, you know what? I've been there, but you're going to be okay. So he listens, he validates, and he assures me. And then I was fine.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. Sometimes that's all we need is like you can do it. Years ago, this is one of the best parenting moments. I had great parents, but I think this is one of the best ones that my parents ever had. So years ago, I was going through some kind of financial struggle. I don't remember what in the world it was. I was very young. You know how you just struggle generally when you're young. And I called my mother and I said, I'm so worried. I'm going to be, I don't know, a couple $100 short this month on bills. I'm very stressed. And my mother paused and she said, Catherine, you are a very smart, capable young woman, and you are going to figure something out and you are going to be okay. I found out years later that immediately after hanging up with me, she called my grandmother crying. And my mother does not cry. Just want to throw that out there. She is not a crier. And
Yeah.
she called my grandmother crying because everything inside of her wanted to fix her daughter's problem, wanted to fix her baby's problem. And she said, no, it'll be better if she learns to do it herself. And so, like your friend did, I'm not going to necessarily fix your problem, but I'm going to come in there and I'm going to set you up for success. And I think that that type of relationship is often the most successful, even as we're adults, to help us be confident in ourselves. Like, yeah, I can do it. Wait a minute. I can figure this out. I'm smart. I can do this.
Yeah. No, I love
Maybe
that.
offer some suggestions, but set the other person up for success if you're the one being called to help them out.
Exactly. And that's what I've loved about this world of coaching that I've been in these last 2 years, because it's really being there for somebody, giving them the space that they need, and just reminding them and giving them the permission to be who they truly can be. Right.
Right. Right.
And it's so powerful. So that coaching aspect, having a mentor, somebody you can call, or even a community. And here's something. Now, I'm not going to bash on some of the local networks, but I think sometimes we go to these networking meetings, if it's an association and a monthly, we need to learn a new HR thing. That's cool and that's important. But it was rare that I found an opportunity to actually talk and say, well, how are you? And how's work?
Right.
Instead of, well, here's the legal update and here's the new benefit and here's that and the other, right? So with a community, you got to find one that says, we're okay to talk to each other about as human beings. What are you struggling with? And it's okay that you're struggling, because so am I,
You're right, which is realistic. Nobody's, even the ones that seem the most together, to your point, you mentioned this at the beginning of the live, are sometimes the ones that are struggling the most, that they can keep it together. They can really, really keep that facade straight, but they actually have a lot going on. So never assume that somebody won't understand your struggle.
Exactly.
When you're approaching somebody.
And another point to that, for example, I think if we need to schedule a weekly reach out to somebody, because that avoids the excuse of, well, I'm too busy, I don't really need it, I'm fine. If you schedule it, then you still don't have to approach that thinking, well, I don't have a specific problem to talk about, or I don't even know what to say. It's just the fact that you call up and you have a heart-to-heart touching base, that all of a sudden you're like, wow, that felt good. I didn't know I was struggling with that, but now I feel so much better. So let's move on.
Absolutely. I like that. Yeah. You're really right. It's not about having a topic that you need help with. It's just about having that communication and that touch point. So I want to expand this a little bit. I know your focus is on HR, but management and leadership can feel this kind of stuff too. And they can have a lot on them, especially if they have some team members that are struggling. So would you recommend that they go to HR about this type of thing? Or would you recommend some other options for people who are in leadership, but not HR?
Well, I could definitely see it going either way. My personal favorite is when the managers can go to HR, because me personally, I loved coaching the managers and saying, yeah, here's how you can, just like you said, I know you're struggling with something. Let's talk about it, because I know you're capable and I know you're going to do great things. And that's what the leader needs. They are smart. They're just working through a little emotional situation.
Right.
So if the leader can go to the HR professional, then fantastic, because it's an internal thing and they have culture going like this and it's awesome. Sometimes an external coach or consultant can be very fruitful too. And maybe you have both, right? One
Absolutely.
topic that you reminded me of is the loneliness of leadership. So in HR or any manager type, it's like, yeah, all of a sudden I'm in charge. I can't talk to my coworkers how I used to if you're promoted, right? Or it's like, well, who do I tell that I'm struggling? If I tell my manager, is he going to see me as not good enough, that I can't do my job, that I don't want to do my job? And so all this is in the emotional realm, my friends.
Yes.
And once we get the emotion resolved and released, like you said, then we can do incredible things.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that. I love that. You do kind of have to get over your own mental blocks too, don't you? Where you're like, okay, I can't talk to somebody about this. So you do have to get over that hump either way. So I want to wrap this up. I loved the conversation, and thank you so very much for joining us today. But I have to ask, because you work in the world of HR, what is one of your funniest HR stories? Please, of course, keep anonymity, but don't divulge names, of course. But I need to hear one of your best HR stories of all time.
Well, shoot. You know, I'll try to think of something, but I've become really good at, in the world of HR, and both from my experience of suffering in silence, right? I just didn't like feeling that way, so I would handle it and kind of delete it, right?
Right.
So,
there's always craziness in HR. It's my favorite topic to get the funny stories from people.
I know, and I'm usually not caught off guard with a question, but boy, you did it.
I know, that's why I did it that way. I love to occasionally catch people off guard. It's one of my favorite tricks. But no, I think it's just, in HR we see so many things, and I've seen funny things on the company side. I've seen funny things and people coming to job interviews. I'll tell one of my all-time favorites. This was an HR person, by the way, who was interviewing. Yeah. And she did great with me. She did a really wonderful job. And then she went to my client, and my client calls me and goes, "What happened?" And I said, "What do you mean, what happened?" And she said, "Well, she was good on the phone. That went good. When we saw her, it looked like she'd been through a hurricane." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said she literally showed up with her hair like all over the place, like it had been windblown and then hair-sprayed that way. Like she said, just literally just sticking out everywhere. She goes, her clothes were drenched, but it was not raining outside. She said, and her makeup was just really wonky. She goes, we were really concerned about her and all this. So I called the candidate out of genuine concern, going, "Oh my God, what has happened?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, I was up clubbing all night. And her interview was first thing in the morning." And she goes, "I was still awake and just went to the interview still dressed." I said, "Okay, but why were you drenching wet?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, they splashed water on us at the club." And she went to her interview that way. And I was just going, what possessed you to do that? Why would you ever do that? So that's a tip from two HR persons here. Do not go to your interview directly after having gone to the club.
Right.
Not helpful.
So I will jump off of that because you gave me a reminder.
Perfect.
I actually never saw this, so I will give you one that I saw, but I never saw this because some of the managers, as I came into this company, they were just sharing stories as we were talking. And it was like, for some of these entry-level positions, we had to remember to remind them about interview etiquette and how you should dress. And we actually had to tell some people, don't come in your prom dress. Like, you don't need to look that fancy.
You had prom queens showing up literally to your interview. That's a new one. I've not heard that one. That's amazing. I love it.
One thing that did happen to me, and this was before the world of virtual where everybody's just doing interviews online. I was interviewing a manager and she looked very professional. And then for some reason, either she got up or she just bumped her computer and it fell. And I saw that she was in pajama pants. And so at the time where that was so unusual, I was just like, what? I know. At least
she had on pajama pants. I mean, at least there was that.
I know. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse, huh?
And I want to thank you for sharing the humor with us. Thank you so much for the wonderful information and the resource ideas for the HR community. As you well know, we all do struggle to let ourselves be vulnerable and to acknowledge some of the stress that we get along with the jobs that we have. So thank you again so much for joining us. If anybody would like to connect with you, please tell them how they can do so.
Absolutely. So I'm Ben Eden on LinkedIn. I have a group called HR Wellbeing on LinkedIn, and that's free to join. I'd love to have you join because then we talk about these things and make it safe. But regardless, please reach out to somebody. I mean, if you got any message from today, even if you don't know what to talk about, just reach out.
Absolutely. And feel free to connect with either of us on LinkedIn. Reach out, ask your questions, throw in any comments. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you all soon. Oh, join me tomorrow morning for Career Launch Live, the full show with Tara Furiani and Alan Ibbotson. We are going to be debunking the myth behind employment gaps. See you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern.